And the very first thing I started doing was trying to help kids figure out what their strengths were. This was a game changer for me, like a legit game changer. And not only because we could figure out more about the student, but because it lights them up.
Hey, I'm Kathleen Rumford from Katalytic Empowerment, where we delve into topics for parents and homeschoolers. And in this 6-part Katalytic Empowerment series, we'll be learning from our guest, Donnie Fitzpatrick, who you just briefly heard, on how parents can help their kids discover their strengths and their best life. Donnie is a passionate high school educator and counselor from British Columbia, Canada. He has his master's degree in educational leadership and counseling and is a certified life coach. Donnie's mission is to help students throw off beliefs that might be holding them back or limiting them, and to support them in discovering their core values and strengths, who they are as human beings, so that they can better navigate their high school years and create their own best life beyond high school, whatever that looks like for them. His work with students, of whom he has interviewed close to 4,000, is based on the work of Marcus Buckingham, known as the world's most prominent researcher on strengths and leadership at work, and author of 2 of the best-selling business books of all time. In this 6-part series, Donnie will be sharing 2 main points. First, how we as parents can help our kids discover their strengths so that they lean into the lives that are right for them. And second, how we as parents can show up and check in with our kids in a safe, non-judgmental way in order to get them to share what's really going on in their lives and in their heads, so we can form honest relationships of walking alongside them. Now, let's jump into part 1. So, Donnie, thank you so much for being here and sharing your experience and wisdom with us.
Thanks for having me.
So, to stay focused on our short time together, I'm going to try to keep us centered around how can parents show up in a way that is open in order to draw out their kids and interact with them in an honoring way to honor their being. But before we even dive into that with regard to parents, Donnie, I'm curious to hear more about your background as an educator and what you were seeing that led you to this mission with the students and helping them find their voices.
When I first started teaching and I got into education 20 years ago, I actually got into it kind of by fluke. I really went to university just because I wanted to play basketball. I had no desire really to be taking school. I really just wanted to play basketball. That was my love. That was the only thing I knew how to do. But in the 20 years that I've been teaching, when I first got into teaching, it was all about what is the right way to do this. I was still looking for my superiors, whether it be a principal or a superintendent, to give me the nod that, yeah, you're doing it right. And then I realized, just like 2 years in, I'm like, something's missing in this picture. Like, if kids are sitting there and they're saying all the right things, but they're really thinking something different, then I'm not really educating kids. What I'm doing is I'm getting them to be really good at just spitting back what I want them to say, what the curriculum says that they're supposed to say. And I was like, this just doesn't seem right. And so I moved. I started out in phys ed and in social studies. I got out of that. I went into English, hoping that would be different because I was really passionate about trying to teach kids to read and write. And then I was like, no, I'm still missing it. And then the shift happened where I was like, oh, the key to this whole thing, it's not about putting information in, it's about how do I draw information out. And that's when I had one of my biggest shifts. So that's kind of like how I started getting into kind of looking at education being a little bit different. It was like, it's not about putting information in, it's about drawing it out. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make when we're educating, is we forget it's not just about putting the information in, although that's important. Like they do have to have those basic skills. But when you want to see kids and bring out the best in them, the only way you can do that is if you learn a way to draw that information out of them, because that's the essence of who they are. So that's kind of where it started.
So you've been in the education field for 20 years in the school system, the public school system, right? You didn't necessarily know what was going on behind the scenes with the kids. You knew that they were potentially regurgitating the correct answers, hopefully, right? But something else was going on and wasn't being exposed. So where did you go from there?
Well, so I started dabbling around with it. I noticed that I was getting kids be way more interested, way more connected with, see, like the way that we teach, I might be teaching 4 subjects to one student. And what I noticed was when I started going about it this way, not only did the relationship explode, but their confidence went way up. And then all of a sudden, kids that didn't want to read, like I had these 2 boys, Jamie and Mike, sweetheart kids, hockey kids. They were like tough as nails, little guys, and they hated reading. They became protective over our classroom library, and like I'm still in touch with them. And they say the biggest difference was you got us to start thinking that we actually weren't dumb. Mm. And the only way that you could do that, it was just by accessing that, going about it in a different way. Kids are so intuitive, like they pick up on everything. And so unfortunately, some of the conclusions they come to aren't always accurate. Sometimes they come, like a question I ask often is, of all the grade 12 students that I interview, I always ask them, was there a time that you can think back when you determined in your head if you were smart or dumb? And they all say yes. And you go, okay, so not that I believe in smart and dumb, but I know that's their language. And I'm like, so when is that? Grade 3, 4. It almost always is grade 4. And that's like, I've interviewed over 3,000 students now. And I don't mean like, hey, how's it going? I mean like in depth, digging around and finding out what's making them tick. And you see a pattern like that over and over, and it's like, oh, that's interesting. So what does that mean in education when kids are already determining whether they're smart or dumb? And unfortunately, more often than not, they focus on what they're not as opposed to what they are. And then you go for the remainder of your years in school thinking that way. It can be a huge detriment. So that was that was a huge shift, was for me being able to kind of go, okay, how am I going to find out more information about this? So I started interviewing them and asking them all sorts of questions. What is it about them? And the very first thing I started doing was trying to help kids figure out what their strengths were. This was a game changer for me, like a legit game changer. And not only because we could figure out more about the student, but because it lights them up. And in fact, when I do this with parents, I have run workshops for parents to understand their child's strengths. And every time the parents end up going, holy smokes, what about me? Like, actually, what are my strengths? I'm actually, now that I think about it, what are mine? Who are the big influencers in my life? So the information that I'm going to share with you guys actually came from a guy named Marcus Buckingham. And Marcus Buckingham worked with the Gallup organization for years and years. And since then he's gone out on his own. He's like a strengths guru. But he did all of his stuff geared towards Fortune 500 companies. And it was all about, when you're building a company, how do you get people into the right spots so that they can be successful and so your business can thrive? And so I went through this curriculum and I was looking at it, and I was right around when I was doing my life coaching. I was just finishing up my master's, and I was like, wow, how could like this? Why would we wait until people are adults to start creating this conversation with people? Like, everyone talks about being proactive. Well, could we do this with kids? I'm like, this would be so easy to do with kids. And so what I did was I adapted the material. And Marcus, actually, he'd be on Oprah Winfrey. And I think it was the week after he'd been on Oprah, he flew out to our school and came and met with all of our kids to see what it was that we were doing with these kids. And it was phenomenal. He was shocked because he never meant for it to be for kids that age. He had no idea it was going to have that kind of impact.
In part 2, Donnie shares how he clarifies the typical definitions of strength and weakness with his students so that they can start identifying what their true strengths are, helping them see things differently and themselves more accurately. And for those listening, this may be truly eye-opening. Let's hear what Donnie has to say.
I do this with kids. This is how I've started out with kids all the time. So you guys, if you were to define what a strength is, what's a strength? So I let the kids talk back and forth. And then I'll say, okay, what's your answers? And so they start sharing. And it doesn't take very long. And the answer they come to always is, strength is something that you're good at. And I'm like, okay. Excellent. Okay, so now if strength's something that you're good at, then what's a weakness? And then in short order, they say, well, a weakness is something that you're weak at. You're not very good at. I say, okay, so let's presume that this definition is wrong. Are you guys like okay with if we just kind of say that maybe this is wrong? We just kind of open our minds a little bit to maybe it being something a little bit different. And they're always like, yeah, okay. And so we go into it and I say, okay, so here's the problem with when we look at strength in that manner. What if you're really good at something, but you hate it? So as a teacher, we're always like, I work in careers. I help kids figure out what their careers are going to be, what their next step is going to be. And they say, well, no, I don't want to do something that I hate. It's like, okay. So when you look at this definition of a strength, is that really a strength then? Johnny's good in soccer. So does that mean he should become a soccer player? Well, we don't really know. Okay, well, does Johnny actually like playing soccer? And we actually had a boy in our last class who actually had that exact example. And he was like, actually, I hate it. I do it because I think my parents love me as a result of me doing so well in it. This is where I get my identity. So then what I do is we take them into a new definition of a strength. Any activity that leaves me feeling strong, even if I'm not great at it. Now, this is a bit of a lot of people kind of get stuck. It's like, well, but it has to be that you have to be good at it. But the thing is, and Marcus talks about this, and this is all coming from Marcus's work, but I just, like I said, I've adapted it to students. And he says, it's interesting because we always say practice makes perfect. But the reality is we don't practice everything equally, do we? We practice the things that we love. So when you look at that new definition of a strength as any activity that leaves me feeling strong, the key piece in it is how you feel about it. So when you look at that feeling aspect in a strength, it changes things now because now you can go, okay, so what are the things that I actually love to do? What are the things that make me pop up in the morning and I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm looking forward to this. And here's a key piece. So I'm going to jump off a little bit and then I'm going to go back to, actually, no, we'll go to the weakness part first. So that's the strength. Any activity that leaves me feeling strong, even if I'm not totally great at it yet. Okay. For a weakness, it's like this: any activity that leaves me feeling weak, even if I'm great at it. Because why would you want to put your attention towards something that is going to absolutely drain you? I interview kids over and over and over. And what and they are not feeling at all like I don't know if I want to go do that. I'm good at it. And when I interview them and I say, well, okay, so what makes you good at it? Like you're obviously killing it. You're getting like unreal grades. And they're having meltdowns because they're going, actually, I'm only getting good grades because I've tied this into like, this is what I have to do. This isn't. And then you start seeing that concept of self-identity start to actually shift because now they don't know the difference between what it is that they want and what it is that they're being told that they should want. And it's a really, really slippery slope that people don't necessarily realize is happening because us as adults, whether we're a parent or whether we're a teacher, we're doing it with the best of intentions. We're doing it with love. We want the best for them. We have experience after all. It's like, we know what this is like. So hold on. No. You want to do this. You want to go in this direction. And they don't know how to say, this isn't all kids, but there's a really good chunk of them. I don't know how to say that I actually don't want to do that because a lot of my self-validation, my love, my connectedness comes from pleasing my parents, the way that I've established myself within my peer group. What happens if all of a sudden I stop doing these things? And they're terrified. Like, I'm not trying to be like a freaky out kind of person, but I have interviewed hordes and hordes of kids. This isn't something that's like, I'll have 8 out of 10 kids leave my office sobbing. And it's not because we're doing something like really crazy with when we're having our interviews. Kids know how to answer 1, 2, and 3. The first 3 questions, they're really good at being like, yeah. Oh, they can fart around in that area. But when you ask the 4th, 5th, and 6th question that goes a little bit deeper, now all of a sudden they're like, shh, they're holding on to the, like, and then it's like, okay. And then it all starts coming out. And what's so beautiful about when you look at strengths in this way is it provides an open opportunity for kids to start discovering their own voice. And I have tons of stories about kids that have, oh my goodness, like it would bring you guys to tears. So a real big distinction then is when we look at those definitions of the old definition of a strength and weakness and a new definition of a strength and weakness, it's empowering. They get to be the expert. We then need to shift into the role of being more of a facilitator, drawing the information out of them, as opposed to, like, if I say, Johnny, you love knitting, and Johnny goes, no, I don't like knitting. But it's like, but look at all the beautiful sweaters that you knit. And he's like, yeah, but I don't. Only he knows that. Like it's not even a conversation. It's like, and what we try to do so often as adults is this is what you should do. This is what you should do. So what we're good at is we can judge talent. We might be like, on an outsider, Kathleen, if you're great at decorating your house, I can sit there on the outside and I can look at it and go, yeah, you know what? You have a knack for this. Like in my opinion, you're very talented in this area. What I can't tell you is, do you love decorating? That is the smallest shift, but it's so critical, because even when we think we're doing that for the kids that we're trying to raise or influence, very rarely do we check in with the right kinds of questions to go, is this actually, are we in alignment here? Like, am I understanding you and seeing you properly? Because that's what the things kids say is like, I'm not being seen and I'm not being heard. And when you talk to adults, whenever they're going through an issue with relationships and whatnot, it's usually because they feel like they're not being seen and being heard. So that right there is kind of like, that's a real snapshot thing of just the 2 definitions. And then a little bit about how talent comes in there, because we can judge somebody's talent, but we can't judge their strength. Now, as a child develops and starts gaining more clarity and starts learning language around this, what you very well may find is that the thing that they are very good at is also something that they really love. But the assumption on our part can't be, just because you're good in this is what you should do. Now, children at school will come to us career counselors, and I'll sit there and I can look at their report card and go, oh, wow. And if I start with their report card, biggest mistake. I don't even look at the report card. Like, I don't even look at it. Other people, most of our career counselors will look at that and they go, oh, this is what you should do. Like, definitely, this is the way you should go. But the reality is like, I'm not interested in that. It's just like IEPs and all these things that like we're labeling kids and jamming them into a certain spot. It's like, I don't even look at that. Like right now, you're Susie, you're coming to me and you're sitting down. It's like, I'm here, you're a human. I'm seeing you as a human first, a student second.
In part 3, Donnie shares 4 signs to determine a true strength and how you can use those to help your kids identify what their true strengths are so they can start living into them without shame. You can do this for yourself as well.
Once again, this is Marcus's work, and I've just adapted it for kids, but it's totally applicable. So the 4 signs of a strength are this. 1, you have a yearning for the topic or activity. Kids love that when you talk about yearning. They're always like, what does that word mean? But yearning is just like, you got to hunger for it. Yeah. Okay. You have a natural curiosity. So not only are you hungry to go do it, but you've got a curiosity about it. It's like nobody's saying go and like, it's the kind of thing where a kid goes home and goes, okay, clicks, and they start looking on the internet and nobody's asking them to do it. They're just going for it. They've got a curiosity for it. The third one, which is really cool, and you'll hear this about, there's a book called Flow, and a lot of people may have heard about it or whatnot, but the third sign is time flies by when you're doing it. 3 hours seems like 5 minutes. And we all have that as adults. We have those experiences. And on the flip side of that, 5 minutes can also seem like 3 hours. Like me on the computer going through certain things, and like it is like I did used to have hair. I pulled it all out just because I was on I'm like, I struggle with this. And then the fourth thing is, after you've done the activity, you feel strong. Even if it was hard, it's like, oh yeah, but you know what? I did that. Good. And there's a little bit of a hunger, and now what can happen is you can easily find kids that have all of these sorts of activities, and a lot of them will have nothing to do with traditional school. So my job I felt was like, okay, so you love hanging out with your friends. Tell me about that. What is it about hanging out with your friends you like? Well, and then they start spewing all this information. And what I'm listening for is, what are the verbs that they're talking about? Well, I love, you know what? I like connecting. We talk on the phone. Oh, talking. So what specifically about talking is it? Like, what kinds of conversations are you guys having? And then you realize that this child loves to listen. They love to piece together a story in their head. They love to take that story and look for solutions within it. But normally what happens is when a person says, we shame them. Get off the phone. You're on the freaking phone all the time. Why are you talking? Get off the phone. And I understand that. I'm not saying that that's not a boundary or an established rule that you'd like to have in your house. But I wouldn't be so quick to gloss over it, because there is a ton of information in there. Kids video gaming. There is tons of information. Like, is it the strategy you like? Is it the competition? Is it trying to beat where you were before? Is it that you want to understand how all of these things work together and how you could create your own version of it? Is it that you like interacting and working as a team with other people?
We're getting comments. So Claudia says, totally agree. I'm a retired physician. I was great at it, but it wasn't good for me. I love being home with my kids, teaching, and I have a consulting job. Perfect. It took me a long time to figure it out. Exactly. They want kids to fit into, they're talking about the school system. They want kids to fit into the norm, or the counselors. And she says, I often said my biggest curse was the fact I was a great student. Now I have a child who learns differently. And it's amazing to me how much more intelligent he is than I am, but it took me taking him out of school to find it, because the model of traditional school was not great for him. And he was an honor student, but he wasn't learning much at all. This is what COVID showed me. This is really cool. Yeah.
They're very powerful.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Claudia. He said, I'm confused though. Wouldn't it be irresponsible to encourage a kid who can't do science to go into medical school because he loves science, even if he can't do it?
Great question.
Yeah.
So there's a distinction in this, right? So let's say I'm really I'm super passionate about science, but my skills aren't there. The key isn't that, well, I want to be a professional pilot and I don't have the skills to do it. The key is that you're encouraging them to be able to explore and go down that road without shaming. That's the key piece. Because if I'm a student, because what we're trying to do is get them to fall in love with the experience of education, get them to fall in love with the things that they are and not bury it. So if a child goes along and we encourage them and encourage them and encourage them because this is where their passion is, they are going to figure out they don't have that. they're going to realize this is not the thing. What we do sometimes with the best of intentions, we want to stop that from happening. We want to protect them from all of these things. And the other thing is that sometimes people bloom late. Like, we have an idea of the way things are supposed to go sequentially. I'm telling you, I just this morning, before I came here for this, there was a sweetheart girl who'd been going through, like, she'd struggled and struggled and struggled in school, grade 9 and grade 10. She had so many different things going on in her life. And now here she is, and she is super dialed in. She's not dialed in because she has to be. She's dialed in because it's like, I see value in this now. And also, she learned a few strategies to be able to help her. Now, I'm not saying that if somebody is absolutely terrible in science, that they can't, that you should be like, yes, go and do that. You're going to become this. It's not about saying that you are going to have that happen. But imagine, I mean, this is what I find when I talk to adults, and even when I look at myself. Some of the worst things that I look at in my life are when the frustration and regret I have that I didn't put my best foot forward. I have regret around, I wish I'd done, like, but what stopped me from doing it? And when I track it back and I go back to why I didn't do it, usually it was fear-based about something that somebody had said to me, or some belief I had that somebody put onto me. I'm not talking about like we should just be like, oh no, you can have a belief and just power through anything. But what I am saying is that it never hurts to provide that space to allow them to explore it more, and for them to kind of conclude on their own, maybe this isn't a good fit. When we try to take control of those reins sometimes, and I see it happen at school all the time, we do more damage than not just having them go in that direction. The kids that I've talked with, and I've talked to thousands of them, it's what that does when a person says, I can't do this. Because now, not only did I necessarily maybe think that I couldn't do it, but now you don't believe in me. And so it's really about how do you craft that kind of conversation so that you can give them the space to go and explore a little bit, but at the same time, be there and kind of go, oh, we should maybe consider this or take a look at this. A great question. I don't know if I totally answered that, but it's give them space to kind of explore it. It doesn't mean that it has to, it doesn't hurt. But at the end of the day, you just got to be really thoughtful about how you navigate that.
In part 4, we discuss how anyone, whether teen or adult, can identify their strengths in an effort to determine what they really want in life. Now, this isn't always with extreme clarity, of course, because it's a process and life's a journey and we're continually learning and growing. But if we want to understand our kids more, it may be a good idea to take a look at ourselves first. How did God wire us? What do we love to do? What lights us up? But also, what beliefs are driving our lives? Why do we say or do the things that we do and maybe project onto our kids? And what is it we really want for ourselves in our lives? I've linked an amazing resource called Strength Finders 2.0 in the description to help with this for ourselves and our kids so they can identify their strengths and what it is they really want for their lives. Let's hear more from Donnie.
There's an example of my niece. I guess it would have been about 8 years ago. We were sitting there having a family dinner, and her name is Melissa. And Melissa is sitting there, and she's in grade 12, and everybody's asking her, hey, Missa, like, what are you going to do next year? What are you going to do? And she's like, oh, I'm going to be a dentist. And everyone's like, oh, great. Good for you, Melissa. That's awesome. And I'm sitting there thinking, I know my niece, right? And I'm thinking, I don't think she's being honest. And so I went over to her and I'm like, hey, miss, like, are you really interested in being a dentist? Like, that's cool. Like, I mean, if you are. And she's like, no. And I'm like, so why did you say that? She goes, Uncle Donnie, I'm so tired of everybody asking me what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to do. And she's like, and I said, well, what made you decide to say a dentist then? And she goes, because everybody that they make enough money and everybody would be proud. Mm. But when I talked to her now she's into financial advising at one of the banks. And actually she did a session with my class on the phone with a bunch of the kids. And when we talked afterwards, it was like, there's a little bit of shame that was kind of at that time when you're holding on to a story of this is what it's like, and it doesn't mean that this is the way it is for everybody, but I hear this a lot. Why can't you be okay with me not knowing? Mm-hmm. And I think it comes from a really caring, loving place of the adults, because we're just like, we so badly want them to be able to know and transition as smoothly as possible. So yeah, it's a really interesting thing.
Yeah. Something that you mentioned earlier made me jot down something. You had said something about the parents kind of forcing a path on the child, and they may not have the experience to say what they want, but I don't even know that they necessarily know what they want. And in fact, when I was leaving my job a couple of years ago as a director of operations of a leadership development company, right? So it was all about leadership development, all about the strength stuff, all about this kind of human being versus a human doing. And I was talking to one of the partners, and I said, how can a 50, however old I was, let's say 52-year-old, not really know what they want? I can't even tell you what I really want. I really don't know, right? And as we do, we're all doing, we don't give ourselves the space necessarily. Some people do, but I haven't really given myself the space. Like, what do I want to do? You know, I can understand how the kids may not know what they want yet, because oftentimes adults don't.
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And I think that this is a really big thing. Like, the shift for me in education really happened when it wasn't that I was looking at the kids. It was, I started looking at me differently. Like, this is like, I always think in this, and I say this when I work with parents and whatnot, it's like, if you want to understand them more, you need to understand you more. Like, not because there's something wrong with you, but it's like, sometimes I see this a lot in public education, where you have teachers that went through the school system and they were like, school was perfect for them. It totally worked. When we did the research at our school, there's only, and it's not like our schools are the norm, but you only got 10 to 12% of the kids actually going on to post-secondary school. And yet I do an activity with the kids where I take 200 students and I say, okay, you guys, so there's going to be one of 4 areas that you go into when you leave high school. You're either going to go into the workforce, you're going to take a gap year, you're going to go traveling, or you're going to post-secondary. Which is the right one to do? And it's a loaded question, because I know what they're going to, and I said, now, and we have this big room, and I'll say, okay, if you're going to post-secondary, go to that one. If you're going to workforce, go over there. If you go, and then they all go like this, and they all move into their spots, and you'll see post-secondary packed. And I'm like, so why is this the one that is the right one to do? And what you see is there's all these beliefs about what it means. Well, if you go to college, you for sure are going to get a good job. Like, you're going to make more money. Then this is their thinking, right? And so what we do is I take them through each section and we look at the pros and cons of all the different ones, so that they can go, oh, well, what do I actually think? Like, and what's cool is they get to hear other people's opinions. Like, in a classroom, I can sit there and I can talk about my 47 years of experience. But if I've got like 30 kids in there and they're all 15-year-olds, that's 450 years of experience collectively when they talk. They're going to get way more out of that, hearing them bang around these ideas, than just simply mine. And it's not that you have it figured out and you got it nailed down. It's a process. It's a lifelong thing. Like Kathleen, you're saying at 52, I didn't really know. I'm still kind of going, it's like, that's normal.
Yeah.
Like, I fell into a career that I absolutely love and adore. Like, kids will say to me, well, what do you do? I'm like, you guys, I'd like to say that it was a fluke. I went to play basketball and I ended up finding something else that I loved. So anyways, I think that one piece about starting with looking at us and kind of going into those places. And that's what happens with the parents when they come to the strengths workshop to learn about their kids. They end up looking at their own stuff, and it's really powerful.
Yeah, one of the things that I was talking to you about last night was, and I do have permission to share this, my younger daughter was telling me in hindsight, or a few years later, she's 24 now, but was saying how during high school she went through bouts of depression. I had no idea.
Mhm.
I had no idea. And as a parent, this is one of the reasons I wanted to have this workshop, because parents don't know what they don't know. And you might think, like you were saying, the kids, give all the right answers, but you don't know necessarily what's really going on. And so to me, the question is just, how do parents show up? How can parents show up in a way that creates a safe space for their kids to then share things with them, and the parent not feeling like they have to have the answers, right? So that they're not walking these tough things, not necessarily alone. You don't know who they're walking them with, right? They're not walking it with
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. So I think I'll try and, so the strengths thing is a really important thing, because it does put the child in the role of being the expert, right?
About themselves, yeah.
And so that's really big. And there's a way to navigate that conversation, so you're not sending them down, some path that's like totally terrible for them. But here's one of the things that I'm gonna share two things. I'm gonna digress a little bit, and I'm gonna bring it right back around to the question that you asked.
In this part 5, Donnie addresses the question of how can parents show up in a way that creates a safe space for their kids to share things with them, and how with his students, he took away a key roadblock or fear preventing them from engaging and thus allowing them to share more authentically. Let's rejoin Donnie now.
I'm gonna share two things. I'm gonna digress a little bit, and I'm gonna bring it right back around to the question that you asked. I had a course 3 years ago. It was with kids from grade 10, 11, and 12. And the whole purpose of the course was our province was going through a restructuring of what we wanted kids to learn, but they weren't telling us what they had to learn. They were just saying, you guys go figure it out. So I had 40 children, me and my buddy Wayne, he was another teacher. He's retired now. And we had 40 students, and it was a super diverse group. So we had kids in there that were African-American. We had kids in there that were Indigenous. We had kids in there that were transitioning between genders. We had kids that had been homeschooled, were coming back. We had kids that were at the Christian school who now had joined us. It was a really cool, diverse group. Having gone through a whole semester, so from September all the way to January, every day we dug and dug and dug to create a curriculum that would be a reflection of what students were wanting. There was two big things that came out in that thing. One was, and we've already alluded to this, is that Mr. Fitz, you guys talk to us all the time about what we're going to do. I don't know how to get through right now. So like we can be talking about that, but I don't know. I need skills right now. So that's where we came into that human being, human doing thing. Because we're always so geared on do, checkbox, checkbox, checkbox. And then it's like, okay, but we're not actually sitting in the pocket with them. So that was a big shift. The other one that was really interesting as well was I had seen this thing on Facebook, and it was a picture of an island. And on this island, it said, if this was your island, what would the one rule be? And so I went to school and I took the same picture and I punked it up on the wall and I said, hey, you guys, okay, cool. So this is your island. You can have anything you want. What would it be? And so they're all saying these things and we're joking around. It's funny. And, they're goofing around. And it's like, okay, cool. So now let's take a look at, this was your school. What's the one rule, mandatory rule that you guys want? So I'm thinking this is going to be really interesting. And I just let it go because I didn't want to get in there and try, and you just want to give them the space. So I'm like, are they going to say no homework? Are they going to say we want to start school later? Well, what's it going to be? And this is what they came up with. And this was consensus. We spent 4 days with them going back and forth, pros and cons, why this, why that. The runner-up was mental health days. They wanted kids to be able to have mental health days where they weren't going to be punished. And by the way, these were like, we had a real strong group of like kids that were killing it and winning all the awards in the school in this group as well. So it was a really wide range, and then some that like were really struggling. But this was the thing. They said it's mandatory that every student sees a counselor at least once a semester. And I was like, holy smokes. That's your guys' one rule. Yeah. It's like, why? What like, to explain this to me? Like, why? How did you guys come up with this? And so they started sharing all, like, it's like, you guys don't know what's going on. Like, you think you do, but you don't really know because you're not taking the time. So we just know how to like get past all of it. So I was like, okay, interesting. So now I'm going to go all the way back to the question that you said about like, how do we create this, this situation between parents and kids? And this was a game changer for me. And kids have told me that it's a game changer for them. And it's not that difficult, but it makes a lot of sense. In high school, when I was in high school, like I told you, all I did was I just wanted to play basketball. I skipped tons and tons and tons of school. I hadn't read a book. Okay. Like I hadn't even read a book. I had not read a book from the time that I started school all the way to the time that I graduated. None. I get to college, I tank. Like I go home. I'm homesick. I go home after a month. I try it again. And then the second time around, I meet this fella who is teaching philosophy. And I love this. He goes, I'm sitting there like, I'm just thinking, we got practice later. I want to go to practice. And then he said this. He had these bowling shoes on and he shuffled around the floor. He's like, you guys, in this class, you can't be wrong. And it was a philosophy class. And he walks over to this table and we have these big, long orange tables. And he taps on the table and he goes, if you say that this table here is green, then you're right. And I was like, what is he talking about? But he got my attention. As a person who, even if you're struggling in the background and nobody knows, there is something hugely liberating about someone saying, you can't be wrong. And so with all of my classes and with parents, I really encourage too, realize that there's certain things where they're subject oriented, where you do have to get information in, but on all the stuff that you're pulling out, just don't make them wrong. And that, it might seem oversimplified, but when I ask kids and we do our reviews at the end of every course, that is the thing that they say over and over and over and over and over again. We couldn't be wrong. So what that does is it allows them to start talking, hear other people talk, and then they start to build this little quiet confidence within themselves. And why that's important is because you can't have kids make good decisions if they can't self-advocate. And kids cannot self-advocate if they're critically in their own mind, always chopping down every single thing that they're thinking, or if they always think that, oh, if I'm wrong, I don't want to be, I'll be embarrassed. And so they never get a chance to actually get that out. Self-advocacy is so important. And when you look at people later in life and when we're struggling with things, so much of it has to do with boundaries and not knowing how to speak up for ourselves and who it is that I actually am. And so our job, I believe, at least the way I approach it, not everybody else, but the way I approach it, and I've had pretty good results, is you're not wrong. We're just going to pull this out. You guys bang the ideas around. You hear things. It's like, oh, okay. And it's always, you can feed off of that. Nobody's wrong here. Let's just, and then you celebrate the shifts. And then kids start, you know what? I started out here and then I'm actually here now. Cool. That's awesome. Okay. But so how do I write that down so you can give me a mark? I'm like, dude, You just did it, because it's the process of learning, not the actual end result of this is the right thing.
In this part 6, Donnie summarizes how creating the mindset of being strong in who you are as a person and you can't be wrong allows students or anyone to be more confident in self-advocating and in engaging in life. By providing his students a safe space to share and process their ideas and beliefs, he engages them as human beings rather than human doings. You can do the same with your own kids so they can step into the person God uniquely created them to be. Let's jump in now. Can we tie this back to what you said at the beginning of when you went into teaching 4 classes instead of just the one or whatever, and now you built deeper relationship? Can you tie this back to that, where the kids can't be wrong, and you said you saw like an escalation of their grades were better and all this kind of stuff, because why?
You see, the one thing is, in high school, normally what happens is I have them for one class, then they leave me, and then they go to someone else to teach them physics. Thank goodness I got someone else to teach them physics, because I'd be terrible at it. But what happens is they leave my class, and there's a mindset that's there that I can't be wrong and whatnot. They switch over into the new class, and it's like, hey, if you don't have this done, this done, this done, all these doors are going to close, and now it's fear-based, and they're freaked out. And so now it's like, and then everything you've taught them before has now just started to diminish. It can be diminished by lunch. I could have them in the first class, they could be excited. By the time lunch rolls around, they're panicked again.
Yeah.
So when you have them for a group, a chunk of time, what you're teaching them, you're not teaching them just content, you're teaching them the mindset. And that's why things like strengths and that you can't be wrong are so important, because there's a time and a place for 2 + 2 = 4. There's no debating that, right? You have to learn those things. But what I found was, when I accessed them as the people first, they felt better about themselves. And when they feel better about themselves, and that doesn't mean giving them everything. Like I run a tight ship. Like, it's like, you don't get, like in my class, you don't get to say, I don't know. That's not an option. You can say, I'm unsure at this moment. Can I get back to you on that? You can say, I'm not really sure right now, but my best guess would be, but you're not allowed to say, I don't know. Because it's not about whether or not you have the right answer. It's about, are you engaging in the process? And what we do so often is we're okay with kids struggling over a math equation or writing a thesis statement, but we're not okay with them sitting with their feelings and struggling through that. And it's like, that's okay. I'll sit here and I'll be with you. Okay. But you got to do it. You got to engage in this. And so I guess the key piece is that when I had them for 3 or 4 classes, when I accessed that part first, then what I saw is the other parts started to get better. And kids, like I said, that didn't even want to read ever, were like now being protective over our classroom library. They were like the ones taking the charge. And it was really cool, because they're not students being human, they're humans being students. And so that piece, some people hear this stuff and they think, well, it's kind of like, oh, that's too soft, it's fluffy stuff. You're talking about feelings and whatnot. It's like, this has nothing to do with that. This is about actually raising the bar. Because if I give you the skills to speak and it's actually in alignment with who you say you want to be, now we can have a different type of conversation that is about holding you accountable to that. And now me teaching you the skills of how it is that you can live in alignment with that. It's not about this. It's not about being fluff. It's about, let's get to it, so that if we're going to have a conversation, if you're going to get in crap about something, then let's make sure it's about you getting crap over the right thing and not something that I'm making up in my own head. And so what that means is I have to change the way that I'm showing up so that I can have those interactions with those kids in a different way. The key thing is, one, like I get choked up right now, like in this second I'm choked up, is this isn't a thing about parenting. It's not, this is just like, when I think of this, it's like, it's not like a parenting workshop where you're trying to say this is how you should parent. It's just, I just want to be part of a solution to try and help parents and kids align so they can have those meaningful connections, so kids can then with some confidence and some support, they parents and children can walk side by side as they celebrate and go through the different challenges that they face in school and as they transition out.
Thank you so much for engaging in this fascinating topic and discussion. I pray that you've been encouraged and feel more equipped to help your child develop the mindset of being strong in who they are as the person God uniquely created them to be. Check out the resources in the description to help you in this journey, and please share the series with anyone you know who might be interested. And as always, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more on parenting and homeschool topics. Till next time, take care and God bless.